Welcome to the Conscious Dominance Podcast, where Andrew and Eric, two dominant men in dom sub relationships, discuss how we approach our dominant roles from a conscious and loving place, and what we learn about ourselves through the deep intimacy that these power exchange dynamics make possible. Sit back and enjoy the show.
Andrew, last week we talked about dominance, and another word that has less people getting upset about. I actually don't feel like I even knew what this word meant or even heard this word used until maybe 3 years ago or 4 years ago. I think it's something that's been more introduced in some books and then online, but lately I've heard it a lot. And the word is containment, and that women want their men to contain them, to provide containment. And that part of what it is to be in the masculine in a relationship is to provide containment. And that women feel better when a man can contain her. Is this synonymous with conscious dominance? Are the two the same thing, just in different language? And could you speak to your relationship with containment?
When I think about containment, first of all, we were on a similar time frame with this because up till a few years ago, I never heard this word in relationship to relationships at all. And the first
Yeah.
few times I started to hearing it, I thought it was so ridiculous. I will fully admit that I mocked it and I laughed at it and I thought it was just
Right.
ridiculous. And to some extent I still do, because you know what? I like to laugh at things that are silly and funny. And to me, to some extent, when I picture a container, I picture like a box.
Right.
But when we use the word containment, then it starts to make a little bit more sense. Because to me, that word is containment means providing structure. It means, back to what we were talking about on the last episode, it's our job to lead. That's what dominance is. Leadership. Dominance is the creation of the directionality. And a part of that is we can't just be going in 25 different directions. There needs to be some structure. Why do you think that dominant submissive relationships often have contracts? Vanilla relationships don't have contracts. At the beginning of a relationship, we don't sit down in a vanilla relationship and write out and talk about what is okay, what isn't okay, how we're going to communicate, how, what happens, what's the accountability if we don't adhere to our agreements that we've made. We don't do these things in vanilla relationships. So containment to me is being the one to set those boundaries, the one to set that structure, and to be the creation of order so that we can come back to this, but I use the analogy of a walled garden, right? Like I am the walled garden within which that Dawn gets to play. And to me, that is the ultimate in containment, meaning I've got our lives all set up for her. She can show up and just be herself and just be in it. So to me, yes, they definitely go hand in hand, but containment is more of how we practically, again, a practical matter, live out and bring conscious dominance into a relationship. It's by setting some damn edges, saying no to her, telling her what is and isn't okay, those kinds of things.
So let's talk about the elements of a contain. So if we have a relationship and there's containment in the relationship, so let's use the example of your relationship and my relationship, and we aspire to have containment in it. What are some specific examples of containment? Give me an example of in the last 48 hours of where you provided containment.
It is a Monday when we are recording this. Last Friday was Friday the 13th, which is a special day for Dawn and I. Our first date was on a Friday the 13th. So every Friday the 13th, it's like our lucky day. We go out for a big fancy date and we have a really good time. We were up late. and Dawn is a mess when she's tired. The next couple of nights, I sent her to bed early. I provided containment by telling her what she needed to do to take care of herself. So she didn't have to decide, am I going to stay up later? Am I going to go to bed early? Because she wants to do both. So sending her to bed is providing containment. That's a very simple example.
Right. I think a time is a good example of that. So you dictate or lead her through the day and the time. You provide that
Mhm.
structure, and you provide the structure. If so, for example, I'll give an example of myself. In the morning, when we wake up, she's hard to wake up. Rachel doesn't want to wake up. And it's lovely to lay in bed with her. It is the loveliest thing ever and to be there. But my job is to get up. My job is to know what time it is. My job is to, if I want to linger for a moment, to put the snooze on or to have a time and to be aware of what that day is and to say what time we're going to wake up and to move us through the day. And she just can trust that. She knows that will happen. So that's a part of containment. It wasn't always like that. There are times when I was ravenous in the morning, but they threw off our day. So the ravenous has to be stated for other times. Or if there is going to be ravenous times, I have to allow for that, pre-plan,
Yep.
pre-think that out. And I think that's another part of it is that for sexuality, if you are want to be spontaneous, if you want to take the moment or take it on, if you're not aware of the location you're doing it, of the time that's allotted for, of her schedule and what she's got coming in next, of what time of the month it is. There's a lot of different things that we should be aware of so that we can provide the container so that she can just relax and enjoy the moment. That's another example of containment. Another example is food. So food, I think, is a great
Mm.
place of containment. What you can eat, can't eat. Are we going to do this together? Rachel's an incredible chef. She's an incredible cook. I outsource a lot of the containment here to her in the sense of being, what are you thinking? Or make a meal plan for the week. And, and I'm thinking that this is going to happen on this day. What's your schedule? What's this? So we literally think together. I think of it as we're two equals.
Well,
And then we're creating the container for the week, but I'm making sure exists a container for the week.
the it comes back to what we talked about on the last episode here. It's who's responsible, right? We can
Right.
delegate things to her, but even that is providing containment, right? Rather than what she has to decide, rather than her thinking about what do I need to think about or plan for, if I delegate something to Dawn, now she does that thing. We're in the process of packing to move right now. I'm not just doing it all myself, but I'm structuring the process of us packing and moving. How is it going to go? What day are we doing what? When are we getting a moving truck? What am I asking her to help with? And so she's still very much helping with the process, but I am the one responsible for creating the structure and executing the plan. And it's like the captain and co-captain on a ship. He has to be in charge. Someone has to be the ultimate decider. And if Dawn is that, it wears her the hell out. It burns her out. If I'm that, it is not stressful for me at all. I enjoy it.
Right.
And she enjoys being helpful to me. One of the things that will excite Dawn almost more than anything else is when I tell her, "You make my life easier." That's
Mhm.
she just melts when I say that to her because feeling helpful, that's the service submissive in her.
And I think Rachel is interesting because she can do so much and has done so much and is working all the time and is the home is so competent in all these areas. And so a lot of what I end up doing to provide container is to say, not this, but this. and not now, but later, or here's how this can happen. It's actually stepping in to take something from her. She gives a great story of where she was bringing a bunch of groceries in, and somebody else in her life, a previous male, was on the couch and said, "You need some help?" And just sat there. And she's just like, "No, I got it." That is the story of so many women and men in their life. And I realized you never fucking ask. You don't ask because as soon as I ask, I'm putting her in charge. I'm putting her making the decision. I step in, literally take it from her. And I say, "You sit down, or here's what you can grab. I'm going to be carrying the groceries in." I don't think she's actually carried groceries in since for the last months. She said she's filled up the gas in her car once in the last 2 years. She's she doesn't I don't think she's made reservations for a meal in the I don't remember the last time that's happened. I don't remember that she's even decided what time we're eating or where we're eating. There are so many opportunities for containment. Every time there's a decision to be made in the home, it's my responsibility to think about the decision and to delegate that. That obviously we're not there yet because Rachel's so much more aware of everything that's going on. But as I become more aware of that and am able to take those things from her, it lessens her burden. I actually get off on it where she finds it to be a
Yep.
burden. You are the one, actually, I just want to stop. You're the one who taught us this, by the way. I want to give you props. It wasn't until you that came along and blew her fuse and was like, it really was a paradigm shift.
I love hearing that, and I thank you for that because this is what I really I say this with a lot of humility, but also a touch of a humble brag to it, I guess, at the same time. I really believe that I am really damn good at what I do in helping people see where they're out of alignment and how to bring themselves back into it if they're willing to see right through people's patterns. And I think it's one of my biggest gifts in being able to help people. So I appreciate you. And I really do love that about you is your to express and share gratitude. That is something that is really special about you and I appreciate it.
Mm, thank you.
I think one of the really interesting things in all of this is I have a couple of clients that I work with right now who are just at the very beginning stages of trying to incorporate Dom sub dynamics into their relationship. And they've got this thing in their head that I'm the Dom now I have to be telling her what to do.
I was there. I know
Yeah.
what that's like.
And so was I think all of us were at some point.
You got to go through that
Yeah.
stage.
But I'm supposed to be telling her what to do, but
It's
right.
exhausting.
It's like, am I supposed to micromanage every little thing? And do I
Right.
just take this from her and I'm going to do it instead of her doing it because I need to be somehow taking control? Like, you have to have some kind of a purpose. This has to be driven. And this is why this has to be driven by some kind of a why. It has to be driven by like a reason. And one of the things I tell people in newer Dom sub dynamics is the relationship is the Dom sub dynamic and the Dom sub dynamic is the relationship. These aren't separate things. The relationship between the two of you becomes the dominant submissive dynamic so that the very structure of what you are together becomes the container, the what holds all of the rules and the rituals and the different stuff that we do in these dom sub relationships. But you have to have you have to have
Yeah.
a purpose for it, and so you're not just bossing her around for no reason.
Well, and I think the purpose could be just the fact that you want to be in polarity. That's enough to be committed to polarity. Ideally, there's more to it, but that's a good starting place. What's interesting is I've thought a lot about this because I've actually, it's not easy. It doesn't come obvious. It's literally something that I feel like I've really struggled with and have been working through. And especially because Rachel's so damn competent in so many ways and is able to do so much and does so much and is alert to so much. And it was almost intimidating. I was like, oh, she's good. How the fuck is this all without me just coming in? There's a period where I was like trying to, or it felt false and weird, sort of telling her what to do all the time. That And I was like, but how do you still maintain like leadership? How is there's this still this energy of dominance? And I had this sort of epiphany when I was thinking about it because I was like, really, what we're doing. I was like, how do people in general behave and are controlled and adjust that without being told what to do? And I was like, oh my God, that's culture. It's culture. When you go to a different country, there's a sort of norms of behavior. And somehow everyone does that because it's the culture. And you go to a restaurant, there's culture. And it's, oh my God, what I am here to do is to establish a culture. And once I had that epiphany that it was that we create a culture, then I don't have to say anything because we know what to do. There's a culture, there's an expectation, and there could be written, and in the culture, there are routines and there are rituals that fall within the culture. For example, in the morning, I get up before her and I make her coffee and I make a little something, let her sleep in a little bit, make sure it's warm enough so when she comes up, there's a coffee, there's a little something. We have a little moment before we're off on our separate ways. That's our specific little routine, but it's part of our culture. We have a culture that we always start and end our day together. Is it always? And we have a culture where wherever she is in public or out in the world, she defers to me and will ask my it's to say my permission is a little bit strong, but she will definitely consider me in all decisions and not just go off and do. The default is that it will be me to be the one to make the decision. The culture is in the in between moments, the end of the day, and we're not knowing what's happening. She literally needs me to come in and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. That's container. That's providing leadership. That's providing
Yep.
container. And I think too often women that are not committed to a relationship like this, anytime there's a sort of a lull, think of it sailing. I've done a number of sailing and the sails are luffing. It's like when you're not tacking quite right. It's nice, the wind in the sail and you're really going along and it just feels really good. And then all of a sudden you're like in between moments and the sails do this little flapping. It's called luffing.
Hmm.
And the boat doesn't go anywhere. The sails go like this. They're luffing. There are moments in the day when we're depolarized. It feels like we're luffing, and we could go in a different direction, and she could lead, and the day's going off and running. But and it's efficient and it might work, but that's not sustainable, and that's not what we're committed to. We know when that's happening we got to come back over in this direction because this is not what our commitment is. But sometimes that's necessary. But, and I think that I just wanted to speak a little bit about some of the examples of this and that this container, I think is a great what you said that the conscious dominance, the result of conscious dominance is containment.
To be able to provide containment, we have to be able to be present. And this is why so much of dominance comes back to our inner work and our inner sense of like inner strength and inner doing our inner work. It's because we have to be able to be present enough in our lives and in her life to be able to make those decisions, to be able to provide that directionality. If we're lost in our heads and we're not here and we're thinking about other things, then we aren't present enough to really provide that containment. We have to actually be there. We have to be in that moment in order to really do this whole thing where we can provide structure. For example, keeping track of little details is an important part of providing containment, like not forgetting shit, being the one to take responsibility for the management of day-to-day life, remembering, okay, we have this thing to do, we have that thing to do, we have this to follow up on. We need to make these doctor's appointments every year in June. We've got to have a process in some way to keep ourselves organized so we aren't lost in our head trying to run to-do lists in our head. And we're not trying to figure everything out and remember everything, but we can actually show up in those moments and make those decisions as they need to be made and consider the broader context at the same time because you get a grasp on it and we get grounded in the moment and we get grounded in ourselves.
It's true. I was terrible at it this. I just wanna say I was terrible at the conscientious attention to detail with certain parts of our life, especially ones around health, especially ones around taking care of my body, especially around things like doctor's appointments or any of that kind of realm. And then also, I wasn't as alert to this with regard to money either, and had a tendency to not necessarily be alert to ha- providing leadership, providing a uh, a plan, providing a structure for all of these things. It's hard to provide leadership for the long term that has any merit if you don't have a plan, if you don't have a foundational structure, if you don't have values, if you don't understand where you're going and why you're going. That isn't really leadership. And the leadership in the moment, I think a lot of times, man, I know for myself, I had to die literally. It's a metaphor, but it's to the notion of what a DS relationship, like, I was so bent on being a dominating and controlling and being in charge that I didn't realize this, but so much of the time I was wanting to appear that
Mhm.
way. And I went against the reality, which was, wait a second, I don't know everything. I have to learn things. How do I stay dominant while also staying humble, while also staying like, I don't know something. I don't know what to do in this situation. And they didn't seem to go together because I was like, how do you stay here? And then I'm going to show her that I don't know, or that she's way better at that, or I forgot that, or I didn't. It's been a journey. It doesn't go perfectly, but I'm going to tell you one thing because this is from my own experience. Step one, don't lie. Don't lie. So if it's goes back, Jordan Peterson said it. He said this. Because he said it to me when I was needing somebody to kick me in the ass. Don't lie. If you didn't do it, you don't know. Don't lie. Just don't lie. And I think that's start with the truth. And there's something in saying the truth that a woman can respect. And to say, I don't know how to do that. I need help. I, I'm You seem to know more than I do on this subject. I'd love for you to help me with this in this moment. God damn, that's powerful. That's actually leadership in that moment. It's not to say that if you're a leader of a company, you don't know how to do everything in the company better than hopefully you hire people that know better than you at the thing that they're hired. It's the same thing in a home. It's the same thing in a relationship. There's going to be things that she's going to do better than I am. It's obviously, this is stupidly obvious, but when we're caught up in this notion of what it is to be a man or to be a dom, and that we have to be right and we have to be, it's a hierarchy and we have to be better. And oh, another one. I'll throw another one out there. It tripped me out for the longest time that she was making more money than I was. That was a trip. It was hard for me to take in. It was hard for me to sit with that fact. And how the fuck can I be dominant and then her to do this? And it flew in the face of a lot of the dominant, excuse me, the prevailing thought out there on the internet and the interwebs. And what I had to come to was whole new relationship with my own self, that it wasn't about, because money, like weather, changes. And ironically, now it's different. The money's kind of all in the same pool, and I'm part of it. And it's different. It's not my money or your money. It's gotten to be much more expansive, and it's much more, and it's much bigger than I could ever imagine. But I had to leave behind the notion of of hierarchy. So as much as I am dominant in the relationship, I'm not better than her. And I think that often I had to leave behind this notion to provide container and to do true container, but to leave behind equating male dominance with male superiority. They don't mean the same thing. A DS relationship is not, I am better. And so hierarchy is an important part of our life. There are parts of our life that's hierarchy. but there's also another part that I've heard people speak of synarchy or these other words. It's both. There are times that I am more important, obviously, and there are times that she's more important. It fluctuates. And at the end of the day, we are equal. Like human beings are intrinsically equal. And if we get into this notion that somehow I am higher than her and she's beneath me, and that she makes more money and I make less, or she knows more or I know less, or it's like my brain, that masculine part of my brain that looked to the external world for my validation and metrics and all this, that shit had to die. That had to fucking die, and I had to wake up to a new version, which was me with me, and that my metrics were inside of me, and it was about me living about growth, and I became addicted to growth, and I became addicted to becoming a better person. And that was what lit me up and excited me. It wasn't some fucking other metrics on the outside.
The flip side to that is like her needing containment doesn't mean that she is not competent.
Exactly.
Need is a very subjective word here, and we have to understand the meanings of the words that we're using, because when we talk about things like Dawn needs me to be the decision maker, it's not because she's incompetent. It's not because somebody asks her a question and she goes, I can't make a decision. That's not what this is.
No.
The reason she needs it is because she cannot be at her best if she has to be the one in charge. And
Mhm.
we aren't after pure competence. We aren't just after getting by. Can she get by? Can she do it? If I wasn't here, if I'm out doing something and she's at home by herself, can she figure out what to have for dinner? Fucking course she can. But you mentioned earlier asking permission. We don't shy away from that. Dawn will flat out ask me permission for things in public
Mhm.
and in private.
Mhm. Mhm.
Not
Mhm.
because I've commanded that she must ask permission. Sometimes I have. If I
Mhm.
have, it's for a reason. It's for her own good.
Mhm. Mhm.
And asking permission can be a very strong form of containment. But
Mhm.
it's not that she can't decide for herself. It's number one,
Mhm.
setting that edge and saying, you don't get to do that unless you get my permission is
Mhm.
polarizing. It's exciting.
Mhm.
And especially if I, for example, we go out to dinner and tell her that I'm going to be ordering the meal tonight. And
Mhm.
if you want to speak to the server, you need to look at me and get my approval first. Okay, so now we're playing
Mhm.
in the energy of permission. We're playing in the energy of containment to some extent, just for
Mhm.
fun, for excitement, for kink, but also setting that edge, setting that boundary of this is how far things are going to go. This is how things are going to go. Now
Mhm.
gets to bring an element of excitement into our relationship. It's leadership and followership again. And this is where sometimes I can make her ask permission because I'm leading her towards some change or evolution in our lives. Sometimes it's just for fun.
Exactly. I love that you said that about permission. It's interesting. Rachel will use that. Sometimes if there's a little riff or something's a little off, like a surefire way for her to win me over is to just find some innocuous thing and ask permission. And it just sets the
Mhm.
tone, and it has a way of being like, "Yes, mister. Yes, I." And she will do this in public in front of people. She will do this with me. And there's this commitment to that. And it's a way, there are these, just like in the culture I was talking about with culture, there are these words, like any culture, there are phrases, there are things that within it that you can create and establish that say, hey, this is our culture. This is the way we roll. This is what our expectations are. And just like any culture, it's alive, it shifts and it changes. And there are times when it's in a different state and it kind of moves and it morphs and it's in these different places. But I love that you said that about permission because I do find that to be hot, and I like it. And I think that's in a sense, cuts to the core of what it is to be a dominant and submissive. If you're someone that needs to go ask permission to do something, that's a more submissive stance. If you don't need to make you just act, you ask permission later, that's a more dominant
And these
stance.
things are they are exciting. And
Yeah.
as our business has grown and our social media presence has grown with infinite devotion, we get the people who reach out to us who are still very clearly in that, like, the excitable stage around this, where they're like, "Oh my god, if I was dominant, I could be in control." And they'll send us these messages that look like something like, "Does Don have to ask permission to eat? Does Don have to ask permission to go to the bathroom? Does Don have to ask permission to get up early?" And they'll ask these questions like, "Holy crap." And it's exciting, it's kinky, it's turning them on to imagine being in control. And one of the things we tell people is that this excitement is pointing at a deeper truth. It's pointing at a desire to lead. It's pointing at a desire to be in charge. It's pointing at a deeper truth about what it is to be masculine and feminine, to be man and woman,
Mhm.
or to be husband and wife. Because really, the farther we go into this, the more it feels like this is what we experience as dom and sub is actually what marriage was probably intended to be in the first place, not just a piece of paper you sign.
Yes, for sure. Still, there's contradictions, there's paradox in here. Rachel wants to have a voice and yet wants me to completely be in charge as much as possible where she doesn't have to utilize that voice. So she wants to get me to a
Mm.
state where I'm aware of what she's needing and desiring, and I can lead her. And I know that what she's desiring, she's actually designed to desire too much. She's designed to desire so much that if she went with everything, it would be damaging to herself, that she's literally designed to not be healthy if she's actually in her feminine because she's actually quite promiscuous in her desires. And that's not
Yeah.
wrong, but she's the culture and the commitment is that's where hierarchy comes in place. Remember before I said we had to move, there is hierarchy in the sense that I come before every other man on the planet. I come before every other person on the planet. And that's actually the right part of this. And so this is where, even though I might say this over here, I'm going to say this over here that falls and looks a lot more like old school. But it's if you took the best of old school and then you combined it with the empowerment of the woman, that's the relationship that we have.
Here's maybe a great way to describe containment to somebody who is still struggling with grasping this word or this concept. When men talk about women, and they talk about women being extremely emotional and being very up and down and changing their minds a lot, every guy has heard other men and maybe said himself that women are crazy, right? That's a unfortunate thing that has taken root, that men speak about women as though or call them crazy. Our job then as masculine containment is to calm that crazy. It's to
Mhm.
to put order to her life so that she can be expressive and big and maybe a little bit crazy. Don loves the song. It was probably 15 years, maybe 20 years old by now, by Buck Cherry, called Crazy Bitch.
We're like that scene from Crocodile Dundee. You ever seen
Oh
Crocodile
god, a
Dundee?
long time ago.
A long time ago, right? And there's this one scene where there's this he calms her down like this and he puts it down. That's what you're
Yeah,
talking about. We've talked about this before, but it's taking that crazy energy and it's saying, without it's
or
not old
channeling
school.
it.
We're not squashing it. It's like the horse
Mhm.
whisper. That's
Yeah,
what it
and
is.
we
That's
can calm
containment.
her, we can bring that crazy bitch energy into, like, under our guidance as the receptive masculine, right? This is what we get to be by
Right.
being open-hearted in the presence of her quote unquote crazy, and receiving all that energy, taking it in as information, and then guiding her, leading her. Maybe it's calming her, maybe it's directing that energy, maybe it's just letting her get it out and then bringing her back into line. But she needs this, like, she needs this kind of containment. She needs this kind of structure, not because, again, she can't survive without it, but she can't be at her best without it. Just like we can't be at our best without a woman reflecting back to us where we are fucking up and where we need to be better. Like, we need each other, and she needs this from us to find the highest expression of her truth.
It's true. And I think that we as men in this, we have to realize that there is a discipline in this. It's to provide container is to stay alert, is to stay present. And so drugs, alcohol, sickness, injuries, our own delusions, our own distraction, our phones, all of these things actually get in the way of providing container. I'm not saying that you have to be cold turkey and not do any of them. I'm just saying be aware that each entity that's out there that takes away your capacity to be alert and be conscious and to be present is actually a threat to your capacity to do container, to be a container for your woman. And it is our job to be alert to that. And if we are choosing to partake in any said activity, which we all do, with it's very least use technology, which is a great container. If can mess with the container, uh, we have to do it consciously. And that's the point. That's the consciousness of it because it's alive to it. It's sometimes, and you might have to make that call. That's what's
Well,
necessary in that moment.
let's put some specificity to that, because what we're talking about here is maybe, hey, you know what? After 8 p.m., the phones are going to get plugged in and put away, and we're not going to be on the phones anymore.
Mhm,
Some sort of structure around this, not to say you don't get to use a phone because I'm the Dom and I have to tell you what to do. No,
mhm.
it's using this. And then how can I use the leadership or the authority position
Right.
she's
It's
granted me in her life by choosing to be my submissive, by choosing to surrender to me? How can I use that authority to make her life and my life and our connection better? One of those things might be the phones are getting turned off when we're out on a date. It might mean that the phones are getting put away at a certain time every night. It might mean that on the weekends, you need to ask my permission to use your phone.
yeah, correct. And the phone, it goes both ways. It's not just her with
No,
her phone, it's also me with my phone.
we,
It's not just her with drinking, it's
yep,
me with
we have to
drinking.
hold ourselves to the
Every other
same standard. Otherwise, then we're just being,
exactly. Yeah,
yep.
exactly. And if we need to bring consciousness to it, and it's our attention and our capacity to be present with her that really is our capacity to provide containment. Because if that containment's a living entity, it's not something we just say, oh, we're in control, this is what it is. There's also her psyche. We're not just containing her actions or her mind, it's also her heart, it's her emotions, it's her feelings. And that's what you spoke to earlier about this. And that's why this word containment, if we don't have an awareness of our own inner life and are sensitive, like you've spoken so well about, then we're not going to be able to be even aware that there are all these unsaid things happening and that they're all that her body language, that there might be something off. We have to be sensitive to where she's feeling because she might be going through the motions of surrendering and submitting to us. And and then we're not actually providing that containment. We're actually performing containment. And and that might be a starting place. I started there. That was
Yeah.
for sure. I started there. But that's not where you want to last because ultimately that's not sustainable for her because you're not going to get her in her pure feminine expression. You're not going to get her just wild. You're not going to get her crazy. And you want that because the part that provides the juice and the ecstasy and the ecstatic and this something that will literally rock your entire fucking world. And there's nothing better than that.
One other important example of containment, I think, that applies to dominant submissive relationships, especially, is to be setting structure around how we are going to communicate,
Yes.
setting some specificity around. I recommend to couples who maybe want to stay more in the protocol of dominance and submission throughout their day, you need to have breaks. You need to have times where you step outside of those roles, outside of the dom sub roles, and have and talk about how things are going, human being to human being.
Right.
And that is a part of our job as the masculine, as the structure, as the containment, to be the one to set those times, to set those protocols, those procedures. How are we going to go about managing our communication in this relationship so that it's
Correct.
supportive of everything that we are wanting to do and be, but also so that the communication doesn't go uncontained and we just share too much.
No, I love what you said. I think it's a really important part of this. Part of containment, and that's why that word is really important, is that part of the containment is when we're depolarized, it's about leading us in and leading us out of polarity. That's part of what containment is. Being aware that I need you in charge for this moment. I need your help in this moment. I don't know what's going on in this moment. It's talking about what I was talking about before. And there could be, you could do that in a polarized way, in a sort of DS kind of, but there's also times when it doesn't actually work to be in that kind of way.
Yeah. Our
Um,
responsibility to lead ourselves back into it, I think is what you're getting at here.
mhm,
As soon
exactly.
as we recognize that the connection is off or something isn't working, i- it's our responsibility to lead us back into the appropriate energy. We can't wait for her to be different before we can be different. That's a part of the the entire element of being a dom, being the responsible one, is being the one to take ownership of the situations and to
Mhm.
help and to lead back into connection. You
Said it really well. It's like you have an awareness to know that you're out of it. So that's where the energy has, you have to become aware to taste and know. And I think it was a while I didn't even know about polarity. I didn't even know I'm being in my masculine. I was doing it so unconsciously. And I think the first step is I'm here and then I'm here and I'm like, oh shit, what happens? How do I get over here? And that the art of that is really what it is to be a conscious dominant. That's truly what it is to be providing containership too. So thank you. You do that well and you teach that well. I'm starting to be a surfer in that. I feel like I've gone through a real strong, long period where I was off of it, being injured and sick. It's really hard to provide that when you're really
and
out of it.
those
It
are the
really
ultimate
is.
learning experiences. When you
They
fall out
are.
of it, finding your way back
They
is
are.
how you learn to stay in it. You need those times of falling
It's
out of
true.
it. That's the only way you get that you learn how to stay in it better is by falling on your ass, getting back up and then learning your lesson.
Andrew, thank you. Another podcast. I love it. I both this the last one we did and this one, I feel like providing a lot of value, but we want to give it out for free. But if anyone listening wants to hear more of us or have us one-on-one, we both are coaches. We both help people one-on-one. We both also have some courses. Check in the little description for links to both and look forward to all of you coming back. We also love your comments. And thank you, Andrew, for your time today with
My
me.
pleasure. Glad to be here.